So to me, the greatest cost of an ambivalent attachment wound is chronic limbo. And that often brings about a certain amount of regret in our life because we're half in, half out, wanting love, but never fully trusting it, wanting safety, but never fully surrendering to it. And over time, that internal ping pong game that goes on, it becomes exhausting because you are carrying both the sword and the shield, always ready to fight, always ready to protect, never, ever at peace. Welcome to Grow with Robin Breckenridge, a podcast about stepping into the most fully expressed, aligned, and conscious version of yourself. Here, we dive into the real work of personal growth, establishing boundaries, understanding your patterns, building self-trust, healing emotional wounds, and creating relationships that feel safe, authentic, and fulfilling. I'm Robin, a life and relationship coach, and in each episode, we'll explore the tools, insights, and conversations that will help you not just improve your life and relationships, but truly transform them. You don't have to just go through it. Let's grow through it, and let's do it together. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. As I was writing this episode today about ambivalent attachment and figuring out what I wanted to share and impart to you guys, I just had a really strong moment of gratitude that, years ago when I was in a really emotionally challenging place in my own life, I don't think I had access to things like this. We didn't have podcasts then. Instagram wasn't a place, or social media was not a place where you necessarily could get access to the type of content that we have on there now for personal development and emotional growth and health. And I just remember being so hungry to just figure out a way to live with this wounding that I was carrying, and maybe even just to understand it a little better. And here I am all these years later with a platform, albeit small and mighty, to be able to impart this wisdom and information that I've learned and embodied in my life, and be able to share that with maybe someone else that's suffering the way that I did. And so I just feel very grateful. I don't take this platform or the ability to be able to teach people things that can help them suffer less in their life. And I also had this moment of really, really positive pride for that girl back then that didn't feel like much and was going through a lot of things that I didn't understand. And for us to be here now and be able to share all of this light from my own, internally dark places that I had to crawl through and crawl out of is just one of the biggest blessings of my life. So when I'm sitting here thinking about ambivalent attachment and how much it's impacted my life, and in ways back in time where it really felt more like a curse than an alarm system or this really useful communication system within me. And so I'm just so grateful that I get to teach this to you guys and frame it in a way where it's not just something that we intellectually understand, but maybe it's something that we can embody and integrate into our life and use it to help us function in our relationships, versus feeling like these default attachment styles are more of a curse in this life. Because although they can be challenging, I'm never going to diminish that. They are also, man, when you learn the language it speaks, it's a really helpful thing to help navigate this world. So let's get to it. 2 weeks ago, we talked about anxious attachment, the part of us that carries the sword in relationship, meaning that we fight. We fight for connection. We fight to be chosen. We fight to feel secure. And then last week, we talked about avoidant attachment, the part that carries the shield in relationships, the part that is really focused on protecting our autonomy, creating distance in order to feel safe, and keeping ourselves safe from feeling engulfed, trapped, or stuck in relationships. But what happens when you're carrying both the sword and the shield? What happens when your nervous system wants intimacy and closeness, but is also terrified of it? So today we're talking about ambivalent attachment. You will often hear this called fearful or disorganized attachment. There's a lot of different languaging that's used in this. I just like simplified language because I don't know. That's just how my brain works. That's how things make sense to me. So I'm going to teach it to you guys in a way that makes sense to me. So in an ambivalent attachment, it really feels like, come here. Wait, not that close. But wait, don't get too far away either, because I need you, but I don't trust you. So ambivalent attachment isn't necessarily confusion because you don't know what you want. I mean, sometimes that happens. But it can also be confusion because your nervous system learned early on people aren't safe or trustworthy. So what that means is that in your primary relationships growing up, you didn't trust the people you were in relationship with. Now, when I talk about trust, sometimes we talk about kind of like high level trust. Like, okay, I know that like if something went down, my parents would show up. Like that is one form of trust. What I'm more talking about is emotional trust, that like if you needed someone to hold space for you, you wouldn't be harmed in it. You wouldn't be attacked. You wouldn't be put down. It wouldn't be minimized. Trust as far as consistency. Remember, consistency is the main ingredient to trust. So if someone in your world growing up was inconsistent energetically, emotionally, inconsistent in their mood, those are all things that create a level of distrust within the relationship. So some common things you may have experienced with an ambivalent attachment wound growing up is inconsistency, drama, things being unpredictable. Maybe your parent is sometimes warm, sometimes cold. So now, even if or when someone does show up for you, even when they're steady, even when they're trying, your nervous system often stays on alert. You crave closeness, but you're scanning for distance. You want intimacy, but you're bracing for the impact of what happens if that intimacy is taken away. Or maybe you're not inviting people who are steady or trying in your life. Maybe you are drawing in what's familiar regardless of merit. Maybe we are bringing in people who are inconsistent. So like I said earlier, if anxious attachment carries the sword, they're looking to fight. Avoidant attachment carries the shield, they're looking to protect. Ambivalent attachment carries both. You'll both fight for intimacy and closeness and then protect yourself from it. You'll reach and then retreat. You'll crave intimacy and then also feel trapped by it. So an ambivalent attachment is the freeze response because your nervous system is overwhelmed by two opposing impulses: move towards, move away. And when both impulses are loud, you stall, you freeze. Ambivalent attachment often forms in homes where safety was inconsistent, emotions were unpredictable, love was conditional or confusing, boundaries weren't clear, caregivers were sometimes safe and sometimes unsafe. So in the child's experience, they just don't know what they're going to get, and they don't know who they can trust. And over time, that turns into something deeper. The internal messages become, I don't trust other people. I don't trust myself. I don't trust the universe, God, creator, the future. And when trust collapses at every level, action feels terrifying. So I nickname the ambivalent attachment wound the push puller, because the origin of an ambivalent attachment wound is that we had inconsistent parents growing up. So that could mean you had one anxious parent, one avoidant parent. It means you could have one parent that's doing both and they're ambivalent themselves. But the primary emotion that you're experiencing in relationships is confusion. So what that looks like is that we can't let people get too close, because if we let them get too close, there's not appropriate boundaries. We're not safe. That avoidant attachment kicks up and we need to move them out because it's not safe for them to be that close. But they also can't get too far away, because if they get too far away, it kicks up the anxious attachment wounding of fear of rejection, abandonment, and neglect. So we can't let people get too far away either. So a healthier place is to keep them in the middle, not too far away, not too close. So an ambivalent attachment wound is fundamentally a collapse of trust. You learn to not trust your instincts, your decisions, your partner, people, timing, God, life unfolding. So you think and feel and think and feel and think and feel about a decision, but it feels safer to be in contemplation of it than in action. So here's a truth I want you to consider. When you were little, you really were stuck. You really didn't have agency. You didn't have power and you didn't have choice. So freezing made a lot of sense. But you are not stuck anymore. You are not in the same environment you grew up in. You can have agency now. Now we just need to let your nervous system know that we are ready to live in a different environment. So when we are experiencing an ambivalent attachment wound, we will often emotionally regulate by having drama-driven relationships. And that is because we didn't experience intimacy. Again, intimacy means into me, you see. I'm not just talking about sex or just being close to someone. I'm talking about letting yourself be witnessed and seen by someone else, which most of us did not get growing up. So because we haven't really experienced intimacy and being witnessed and being safe enough to be witnessed, then intensity feels like the cheap next best option. Intensity mimics the strong feeling of intimacy. But any of you who are listening who have had a lot of intensity in your relationships, there tends to not be a lot of peace or safety alongside that intensity. So we will often have drama-driven relationships because it's kind of meeting the need of like that push-pull dynamic. And any of us who will engage in sustained push-pull dynamics are not operating in our highest, healthiest self relationally. So that leads me to the next way that we will regulate emotionally. We will often get ourselves into push-pull dynamics because it is familiar. Do I need to say anything more? I don't think so. I think we've covered it. We will also create intensity outside of our relationships. That's where like the little bit of avoidance in us comes up. Work, friends, hobbies, addictions, affairs, fantasy thinking, etc. We will also rely on someone else to create clarity or movement in the relationship. So I see that a lot where I'll have people come in to do their own work, and then they'll basically tell me the whole time that it's just their partner that needs to change or stop drinking or stop being unavailable or whatever it is. And then basically the thought is when that person stops doing it, it's going to create enough movement that everything's going to be healthy in the relationship. And that's not to say that people aren't bringing behavior that is contributing to the toxic dynamics in the relationship. But I don't think anybody gets out of any relationship conflict without both people growing to some degree. There is a mirror coming up for both people. And listen, that mirror could be that you need to leave. Like that could be. I'm not saying, hey, like wait it out and learn your lesson. If there's anything going on in your relationship that is abusive, toxic, or unsafe, it's okay to make the decision to leave as well. But a lot of the time, I can kind of sniff out people's attachment styles very early on, even in consults when I'm talking to people. And that idea of like that other person needs to change for everything to be better tends to happen when we are in an ambivalent state and we aren't ready to get into action, but we want the other person to. And then one of the most common ways we will emotionally regulate when we're in this attachment style is when there is a decision that needs to be made, we will often get into an internal battle instead of aligned action. Now, when I teach this, I'll say people will stay safe by not getting into action. Now, I would say safe in quotation marks. Are you actually safe or do you just feel safe? The reason why not moving feels safe is one, it puts less pressure on you to have to make a decision or a really hard decision. And maybe if you're frozen or stuck, maybe you won't be rejected. Maybe you won't be engulfed. So you may stay quote unquote safe, but you'll probably stay stuck. You may stay quote unquote safe. High likelihood you're going to stay small. Okay, so in the think, feel, do model that we've been using in these different attachment styles, in an ambivalent attachment style, it's going to look a lot like thinking and feeling and thinking and feeling and thinking and feeling, or feeling and thinking and feeling and thinking and feeling and thinking, but not a lot of action is going on. Sometimes when I'm in communication with people who are really, really activated in their ambivalence, it almost sounds like a ping pong match going back and forth, like think, feel, do, 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 do. So let's give an example. You feel fear, and then you think about what it means. And then you feel anxiety, and then you think about every possible outcome. And then you replay conversations, and then you predict the future, and then you search for certainty. And because you're afraid of making the wrong decision, you make no decision. So a really great example of that think, feel, no action is jobs. I have had so many people come to this work and say, like, I hate my job, it's toxic. My boss is a narcissist. I hate going there. Okay. But what if I leave my job and I can't find another one? What if this is really better than it is in other places? And we start to do that dance of like, I feel a certain way. I don't like this job. I don't feel safe. It no longer feels aligned. And then our brain will come in and start to bargain with it. And we go back and forth, and we don't leave the job. There are so many well-intended people who have stayed in jobs that are not in alignment for years, decades. Same goes with relationships. I've had people do this with historical friendships that they no longer want to be a part of. So often people who are more of a default ambivalent attacher often find themselves in drama-driven relationships, like I spoke to earlier. And that's because the intensity mimics intimacy. So if love felt chaotic, dramatic, unpredictable, calm will feel boring. Peace will feel suspicious. Stability will feel stagnant. So sometimes when we're in an ambivalent attachment, we can unconsciously create intensity in the relationship, arguments, emotional spikes, push-pull dynamics, just to feel connection. But remember, intensity activates the nervous, intimacy regulates it, and they are not the same thing. So here are some common behavioral traits that you will find when you're activated in an ambivalent attachment wound. Your behavior can be hot and cold. You can overanalyze text and tone, feel deeply attached and then suddenly doubtful, staying in relationships, jobs, situations that do not meet your needs or feel self-honoring, staying in relationships that feel confusing, being afraid to leave, but afraid to fully commit. I've seen it with people who are maybe contemplating a relationship between two people and we don't know which one to choose. Being afraid to leave, but afraid to fully commit. Pulling away when things feel too close or intimate. Reaching out to feel some level of security. Using people to manage and tolerate our feelings or alter our mood. Feeling chronically unsure. So what happens is confusion becomes the baseline emotional state. And instead of seeing confusion as a red flag that we need to pause and get curious with, you get into an internal battle with yourself. So to me, the greatest cost of an ambivalent attachment wound is chronic limbo. And that often brings about a certain amount of regret in our life because we're half in, half out, wanting love, but never fully trusting it, wanting safety, but never fully surrendering to it. And over time, that internal ping pong game that goes on, it becomes exhausting because you are carrying both the sword and the shield, always ready to fight, always ready to protect, never, ever at peace. So an ambivalent attachment wound doesn't heal or regulate through more thinking or feeling. It heals through action. Aligned action. Because action creates data, and data builds self-trust and gives us the information we need to know whether something was the right choice or the wrong choice. I've been at this for a minute. There are some situations where you just cannot get ahead of whether or not it is ultimately the right or wrong choice for you. The only way we'll be able to vet out whether that choice is right, wrong, or aligned for us is by stepping into it and getting the information. Now, I have a saying that I say to myself, and I've said to so many clients, there are no right or wrong choices, just aligned or not aligned. There are no right or wrong choices, just learning. Like I say both of those back to back because I'm very aware that at points of my own journey to think, okay, well, what's in alignment or not? I didn't know. Alignment to me is being connected with your truth and then acting in accordance with that truth. You know, it takes time for us to learn our truth, to get to know ourselves, to develop trust and understanding which voice in us is the one that we can trust and the one we can't trust. So if you are in a part of the work where you're like, you know what, I have a better internal understanding of what's in alignment and what's not in alignment. Like today I had someone come in. She is dating. She's using some of the dating apps. And she said, Robin, I don't like Hinge. When I go on Hinge, I feel yucky. But I'm really afraid that like if I get off Hinge, I'll never meet someone. Okay. Really great example of like we can feel something and then we can have a thought about it. And without pausing and considering what's in alignment for us, probably going to choose out of fear, right? Like we could stay on Hinge. Listen, Hinge is everybody has their own personal experience with everything. There are people that would love Hinge and there's people that don't. What she was telling me is my nervous system is giving me a warning that I'm not safe on this app. And I always come back to the universe is either a place of abundance or a place of lack. And we have full autonomy to decide which lens we want to look through. So if we're operating that the world is a place of lack or the universe is a place of lack, she better cling on to that dating app, right? Because what if it's the only one? But if we decide that the world and the universe is a place of abundance, she could listen to her nervous system. Her nervous system, it's directional. It's going, hey, not here. This one's not safe for you. And it was so cute when we were talking. She goes, oh my God, you know what? None of my friends met any of their partners on Hinge, which brought some additional data that like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm not in a state of lack. So the action step we decided on was to get off of Hinge for a period of time and get some data. And if she can't meet anybody, we could contemplate getting back on Hinge in a way that felt safer and in alignment for her. And if she feels better off it, that's really great information too. So there are no right or wrong decisions, just aligned or not aligned, and ultimately just learning. So if we take out the pressure that you have to make the right decision, then we go forward one step at a time towards the decision that feels more in alignment. Now, here's a hack for anybody who has an ambivalent attachment wound. Making no decision is a decision. So that's often very freeing when people come in with a lot of pressure to make a decision. And I say, hey, not making a decision is a decision. And they'll go, okay, Robin, this week, I don't want to decide. And it's like the weight of pressure is lifted from their shoulders. So there are times where we have enough space and grace to say, I don't need to make this decision right now. What I could actively do is continue to get information or get curious with how I feel, and then I can make the decision. But ultimately, what's being asked of you is to get into action and then to collect that data and decide after the fact. Now, listen, what is always available to us is learning. So even if we do choose something and we go, man, that was not the right choice, I guarantee you there was a learning opportunity there that was divinely aligned on your path. So we can learn from anything. So how do we shift an ambivalent attachment to a secure attachment? Well, we have to get curious with ourselves. We have to pause. That's the number one step. You catch yourself thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking about what you felt and feeling about what you thought, and you pause. And then we bring in the ability to have agency, and we choose. And we can choose an action that is more in alignment based off the information we have at the time. So it can look like one small action step, not to guarantee or control the outcome. Because guys, listen, I've been real honest on this podcast. If I could teach everybody how to control the outcomes, boo, I'd be doing this from my multiple vacation homes, ranking in all the money and controlling all the outcomes myself. But you can't do it. I tried. I'm sure many of you have tried. So many well-intended people have tried. It's not possible. So this isn't to guarantee an outcome. It is to build trust in yourself. So when you take that small action step, you can ask the question instead of assuming, set the boundary instead of testing, make a choice instead of feeling frozen, stuck, or trapped. And you can trust that you can handle the outcome and learn from it, because the adult version of you has something the child version of you didn't: agency. The universe gives us an opportunity to choose and re-choose in every single moment. So you are not trapped anymore. And unless someone has you tied to a chair somewhere, there's a story that you're trapped. Now, this is not to discount people who are in really challenging situations of abuse or oppression. Like, listen, there are nuances to all of this. If that is you, please write me. We'll figure out a way to get you the help that you need. But generally speaking, You are not trapped. You just need to learn how to step into action. And your nervous system needs to trust something enough to do it, because anytime we're taking a risk, it requires trust of something. And I think that's what's really beautiful about the relationships that I get to build in my work, is that often my clients are trusting me. And because of the approach that I have in this work, which is I do allow my clients to text me, email me in between sessions. It allows them to know I am there for them, that they are not alone, and that I will stay consistent in this work. And it allows them to trust someone in their life. And then, of course, I become a model for them to be able to build that same relationship with themselves. So you are not trapped anymore. You can leave. You can stay. You can ask, you can say no, you can change your mind. And you can trust that whatever happens next, not only will you survive it, but you can alchemize it to wisdom, growth, and healing. So if you identify with having a default ambivalent attachment, you're not unstable. You are conflicted because your early environment and relationships were confusing. Your nervous system learned to hold two survival jobs: fight for love and protect yourself from it, the sword and the shield. And I want you to hear me that secure attachment is possible, not through certainty, through trust in yourself, trust in your discernment, trust that you can handle what comes your way, trust that you can learn and grow from it, and trust that you are no longer stuck. And sometimes trust that something bigger than you is holding the unfolding. You don't have to predict all of the right choices relationally. Listen, hate to break it to you, but every single relationship is a risk. None of them are 100% guaranteed. So you don't have to predict the outcomes in your life to be able to trust it. You just have to take one aligned step forward and learn. So remember, when you find yourself in that internal battle, pause. See what the next least harmful or kindest action could be. If you need help, get support. There are so many wonderful, qualified professionals out there. There is so much great information out there on so many different platforms. You are welcome to reach out with any questions you have for me. For next week, we're going to talk about secure attachment, which is the ultimate goal of this work, or any attachment or personal growth work that you do in your life. And then I got a whole bunch of stuff planned. In fact, I'm bringing on an expert on attachment who I respect and value so deeply. We even teach things a little bit differently, but that's kind of the fun of this, that my way is not the only way. And I'm really excited to bring her on. So let's talk about secure attachment next time. And then we've got my amazing colleague, Rose Vigiano, coming in to talk about how attachment styles impact our relationships and our romantic relationships. And again, I am so grateful to be here and so grateful to be in the position to now share this information to all of you who are hungry and ready to learn and receive it. So see you next week. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for being here and for doing this work. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Come connect with me over on TikTok at Robin Breckenridge or Instagram at Coach with Robin, where I share even more insights, tools, and conversations around boundaries, self-trust, relational healing, and so much more. And just a quick reminder, this podcast is for educational and personal growth purposes only. The insights and tools I share are based on my experience as a life and relationship coach and are meant for general guidance. Each person's story is unique, and the nuances of individual experiences can't always be addressed in this format. What's shared here may not be applicable to every situation. especially those involving abuse, oppression, severe mental illness, or systematic harm. If you or someone you know is in crisis, please seek support from a qualified mental health professional or emergency resources. Thank you for listening and for showing up for yourself in this way. Take care, and I'll see you next time.